This is great, Elena. Should we?
Yes, let's start. We are broadcasting on YouTube, so we have some people here and there on Zoom and on YouTube. So wherever you are, welcome, welcome, welcome. On Zoom, of course, you can use the chat box to chat with us, throw some questions at us throughout the presentation. On YouTube, I'm watching it here on my side here as well. So if you have questions or any kind of suggestions or thoughts on this topic as we go through it, also please feel free to do so. Thank you for joining us. We're going to introduce ourselves a little bit more officially in just a moment, but you are here for the Youth Challenge. This is, Ivan knows he's going to have to stop me at some point because I could talk about this topic for hours and hours and hours. I see this as a big obstacle for our future youth, and when it comes to really preparing the young generations that are upcoming for what the future world looks like for us, the future of work especially. So looking forward to sharing some interesting findings with you guys, as well as some solutions of how we can better do this as educators, as professionals in our fields.
This is great, Elena. So it is time to introduce ourselves, right?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so just real quickly, my name is Elena Aguerigimova, co-founder of Western, come from background of higher education and learning. I've spent majority of my career working in different organizations and institutions across the US, in the UAE, have also traveled internationally to deliver different sessions, teacher education sessions, working with students and parents, and then transitioning more towards the life in the corporate world, as well as once I kind of shifted into the world of entrepreneurship. And what speaks really highly to me in this particular session that we're doing today and why this matters so much to me personally is because when I was studying in university, and what's happening today hasn't changed much in terms of the progress that we made when it comes to preparing the youth for the future of education, for the future of work, sorry. So the gaps are just, it seems like getting bigger. The challenges are still the same. And I was a struggling student because I didn't have the support and I didn't have the kind of guidance that was really required to help me prepare for the future work. I had to learn the hard way. And as I've kind of grown in higher education and then into the corporate world, I realized that the challenges are pretty much the same across board. And yet we're not really changing much as educators and institutions. And this is why part of kind of why we started Western, and a big arm of Western as a company is our focus on the young talent, and really kind of advocating for that change and providing solutions for that change when we work with institutions and educational organizations as well as corporates. But anyway, we'll talk about that more later. For me, it was a passion that turned into a career and then a business. Lucky enough, I met Ivan when I moved to Dubai like 7 years ago. We've been friends for many, many years. And then we did something that we don't recommend people to do, which is start a business together. So this is where we kind of came up with Western. You might have read about us and seen us in different magazines. You can see at the bottom of the screen here. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. Ivan, you want to do a quick intro?
Yes. So myself, I have a background in engineering. So I am a person who loves numbers. I have been working in the corporate world, not in engineering, but in corporate strategy. So for 17 years, I've been living and breathing all of the different changes and transformation that multinational organizations should do. I'm passionate about behavioral science, in fact, because of the role of marketing in my previous job. In fact, I understood that there is a powerful tool in order to nudge people to achieve what they want, to learn new stuff, to really have a change in their lives. So, and this is mainly what we practice. In fact, Elena, merging, in fact, the area of learning with behavioral science in order to help people adopt change in their lives, learn better, and in fact, have really a valid way in order to transform organizations like corporations or organizations such as educational institutions. And we are super excited because when we are talking about the world of youth, and this is something that we have been discussing quite a lot with Elena, the biggest impact that we have in the life of people is when they have the possibility to learn in a different manner, to learn and process information in a better way, so that it is not about just learning to acquire knowledge, but it's learning to transform your life. And this is essentially what we do, merging behavioral science and technology with Besson in order to help individuals grow as a person and fuel the productivity and performance of organization or institutions. So that's all from our side. I think it's time to move with the core of the challenge, Elena.
Yeah, and I also see that we have more people joining on YouTube, so I am keeping an eye on it. So please feel free to drop your questions. Those who just recently joined, drop your questions, whether you're on Zoom or on YouTube, drop your thoughts, your challenges, whatever it may be throughout the session. I am keeping an eye on the chat on YouTube. And so let's rock and roll. Listen, what you're going to get out of this today is we're going to look at that gap that I was talking about, where many of us are aware of it. How do we actually, how do we create opportunities within our organizations and institutions to help close that gap in a way that is affordable for us, because the budgets are a big thing usually, right? So we're going to make sure it's affordable, we're going to make sure it's applicable, and we're going to make sure it actually has some action points that you guys can take away from this session. So that's kind of what the objectives are here today. And of course, we'd love for you to interact and again, ask those questions, throw challenges at us, and let's have a discussion.
This is great. So I guess that we move on and we ask a major question, right?
Yeah, so for those of you guys that are on YouTube, maybe you can just go to, you can either, I'm not sure if you're able to see the slider right there. I don't see it on YouTube for some reason, Yvonne.
Because there is a slight delay between YouTube and Zoom. So it will
appear in just a minute. So what I want you guys to think about is the question that we're posing here to get us to start thinking about this is, what do you think is the biggest challenge graduates or youth face today in the world of work? Again, if you're on YouTube, just drop it in the chat for us. So what do you feel is the biggest challenge that students, graduate, young people face today in the world of work? You should now see the Slido on the YouTube as well. You can either go to slido.com, put in the code 262576, or use the little QR code. So what do you think is the biggest challenge? Or you can just simply type in the chat. Give you guys 30 seconds or so. All right. So we have some answers coming in. I assume it's from Zoom. On YouTube, if you guys are on YouTube, you can just use in the chat. In the chat, I have people saying lack of industry and specific training. Yes, lack of industry. Industry-specific training, sorry. We have a couple from Zoom as well, building soft skills.
Adaptability now, changeable requirements, yes.
And somebody also said applying theoretical knowledge. Yeah, a lot of theory and not enough actual application. We'll give a few more seconds for more to come in. I know there's a bit of a delay on the YouTube side, so that's all right. All right, let's go ahead and move on. So yes, you guys are, so I know there's some comments as well on YouTube. So thank you guys for participating. So we'll just move on, but yeah, absolutely. So these are some of the challenges that we see as well in our work with young people and institutions. And I think that we can all relate to this. And somebody else also said misalignment skills for business needs. Absolutely. Well, that is Priya, because corporates and education institutions don't talk to each other. That's where it needs to start. But we're going to talk about that in just a moment, how that happens. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's get into the specifically focusing on the Middle East. So I know our audience right now is coming from different parts of the world, and I would imagine a lot of the things that you're about to see, a lot of the kind of data that we're about to show you is probably similar across board, because at the end of the day, no matter where we were globally, the challenge for young people today is similar across the world. So we're going to focus on the Middle East, but again, I really feel that this is applicable across board. And if those of you that are joining from different parts of the world, drop us a note in the channel and just let us know, like, do you agree? Is this happening in your region as well? So right now, the situation of graduates in the Middle East, and I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to try to guess, what do you think is still the most popular undergraduate major globally at the, the large institutions? What do you see as the largest, the most popular major for undergraduate studies? I'll give you a few seconds just to guess to yourself in your mind. And you might be having different options. And what I can tell you is, for better or for worse, it is still business administration. So the business administration is still one of the most popular undergraduate majors today. Yet it does not prepare you for business or any kind of administration. It does not give you the skills of even entrepreneurship. And at the same time, it is not a degree that is sought after when it comes to corporations. So right now, students are studying along the lines of business, engineering, accounting, and finance is another very popular. IT, computer science, sciences, etc. You see the line. Interestingly enough, from this report, 38% of students or graduates believe they didn't choose the right major. And that is the case in most, for many students. And this says 38% for this particular group in the Middle East. If you go to global statistics, it's probably even higher. So globally, over 50% of students that graduate do not pursue a career in the degree that they've studied. And that is because it usually was either by the time they graduated, the market has shifted, has changed. They've realized that after 4 years, they're actually not really interested in this major. But hey, we've invested 4 years, I might as well finish it, right? Versus making a change. So the reality is that a lot of students are starting their educational journey with the wrong major. And part of the issue there is because when we talk about these challenges, they not only start at institutional, like higher education level, they start at that high school level when you are at that sort of, a graduate, like 16, 17 years old, and even probably earlier on, depending on where you're studying. But that's the challenge we have today. We are approaching it from a different perspective, right? So we are asking students to follow a certain kind of pathway that we design for them. Most cases, educators, maybe parents, school administrators. And then by the time they get to college, we expect them, by the age of 19, we want them to choose a major. We want them to choose a major in a job they've never tried, in an industry they don't really have any info and insights on, in most cases, right? So they are taking majors based on very minimal information and exposure to that particular industry. And as Priya mentioned, that industry experience is what's lacking. So we're going to get more into the challenge with that in a moment. But the point is that one of the challenges is that we're not exposing students to enough industry insights before they choose their majors. And then what happens is, on the other side, when it comes to the challenges that they have, is finding a job. Well, that's because, again, we focus so much on the educational part and like getting the good grades and making sure we complete our degree and get that piece of paper that's going to open up this world to us. But it's not always the case. So what's often missing is other skills that they need in order for them to land that job. right? And again, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So other challenges they have is saving money, because financial literacy is not even something that is on the minds of anybody right now when it comes in educational institutions. And I don't understand. That's another challenge. I have yet to understand why this happens. Discovering what they want to do in life. Again, we are kind of almost creating pathways, and we're trying to put students into these boxes when we're sending them off to schools and universities. And then when there's not a box that they can fit in, what often happens is that instead of helping them create their own box and helping them create their own career path, what happens is we put them in a box that they don't necessarily belong to, where they spend 4 years studying a degree they have no interest in, graduating, and furthermore, that degree is not even applicable anymore because the world has shifted very fast. So again, not all majors, but a lot of the majors that we talk about here. So, and there's of course a lot of other aspects that they struggle with because they're essentially not equipped with skills to self-manage, to be resilient, and the ability to connect with other people. And somebody also mentioned here, Khalid mentioned in the chat on Zoom, I think it all depends on the educational system, whether students get the chance to explore and try various subjects before they join universities. Absolutely, Khalid, great point. And so, and that's the point of this session today, is how can we as educators, as leaders at institutions, and even those that are maybe in corporations that are perhaps talking or should be talking with these institutional bodies, because these institutional bodies are preparing talent for you, for the corporate. So this is what we're here to discuss, is to offer you guys some solutions that you can easily go and implement on your own in your respective institutions, organizations that you work in. So, and that's absolutely spot on, Khalid. And it's all, yes, it depends, but the point here is how can we improve? What can we do better? Right? So if you're already implementing some of it and maybe it's not effective, can you do better? And if you don't have this, how can you implement this?
Elena, you're totally right. When I think about the educational system where we have only like 6-7 different topics in high school, how can we be able to explore, in fact, the different type of careers and in fact get the curiosity to get to know a little bit more what exactly a specific profession is doing, how they live the day-to-day, so that they can be encouraged to find the right path for their lives.
And also, I'm sorry, but I have to jump in here for just a second. So, another point is that even if the institution, because I realize that there's some situations where we cannot always implement certain things in our institutions, or maybe we don't have the power to do so, whatever the case may be, but there's still something that we can do, like as educators, to help those students. So even if the programs and this implementation is not available, or maybe it's going to take some time to implement in your particular institution, there's still a lot of things that you can share with students of how they can find those opportunities for themselves. So there's two responsible parties here. We have the institution and the educators, but we also have the students themselves and the parents. So for those of you who are parents, just because an institution or educational body is not providing certain opportunities does not mean they do not exist, and does not mean that there's not a lot of other external alternative options for your student or graduate to get this exposure. So it's not all on the educational institution or the corporate. There's also a big responsibility that comes from the student side, graduate, parents, family. But okay, we can move on.
Yep, and totally true.
And now let's flip it on the side of the corporate, right? Talking about the gaps. So we talked about the challenges the students are facing. And now we are going to look at what are the corporates expecting. So corporates are saying, when they were interviewed for this particular survey in the Middle East, they're saying fresh graduates may lack needed experience, which is another thing I need to pick on corporates at some point, because the job descriptions are getting crazier and crazier. They're expecting students to have X number of years of experience prior to joining them when they're like 21. And internships often don't count with some of these organizations. That's a different battle I'm going to fight on a different webinar. But so the point is that from the perspective of the corporate, they feel that students are lacking experience, maybe necessary skills. The skills that we're talking about are the human skills in most cases that Yvonne is going to cover next. Also, they have high salary expectations, part of that is because, again, we don't expose them to what the world of work really is like. We don't expose them to what does it take to grow from, from being an entry-level employee. What does it take to progress in the career? Because it's a fact that unless you are, you have your major connections or whatever you want to call them, or wasta as we call it in the Middle East, unless you have that, realistically, you're going to start at the bottom, maybe doing some really boring, really mundane work. That's the reality. But for some reason, we have created these images in the student's mind that when you graduate, you're going to go into corporate, you're going to go into management position, and there's not going to be a lot of struggle. But the reality is, it is about struggle. It is about challenges, and that's how we grow. And so the sooner we can expose students to that struggle, to those challenges, we're going to show you how in a minute, but the sooner we can expose students to that, the more they're going to be ready to prepare to face the world of work, which is also very competitive. It is political. It is hungry in terms of how competitive it is, and it is cutthroat in many, many industries. And unless you have the resilience, adaptability to be able to function at that level, it's going to be very difficult for your graduates to thrive, right? And so anyway, and that doesn't start when you graduate university. That starts at a much younger age. And so that's something to consider. Anyway, so, and of course, the fresh graduates tend to change jobs quickly. A lot of that has to do with they're not sure they even want to be in that particular industry. So they tend to kind of go in and then they realize it's not for them and they leave, etc. And also there's not a support system inside corporations to help them succeed in their roles and to help them take time to develop. So anyway, lack of practice and skills is what's missing. And somebody mentioned on the YouTube, I think it was Rada, she said that it was, there is the applying theoretical knowledge. So that's what's missing. We teach a lot of theory at universities, but we don't teach the actual application. I told you, Ivan, I can go for hours on this topic. You know how strongly I feel about this.
Really, Elena, when you have the passion going on, I get involved. I'm all for it.
Yeah, so, but let's just finish up, and then Priya, I see your comment. I'm going to get to it in just a moment. So, and then on the top of that, what do corporates expect from new hires as well? We can click. So what are they expecting? Of course, computer skills, IT skills, coding, all of that, that is the hot and trendy. We're always going to need those kind of skills moving forward, tech skills in general. But look at the second part of this, the 43% interpersonal and team skills. Interpersonal and team skills. These are some of the highest requirements from organizations. Interpersonal skills, meaning just really social skills, emotional intelligence, right? Being able to connect with other people, being able to read the room, right? Being able to build your reputation among your colleagues, etc. That is so important. Linguistic skills, of course, depending on the particular region. Technical skills, yes, of course, these are important. Communication skills, flexibility and adaptability to change, analytical problem solving, leadership, negotiation, etc. Most universities, surely you do offer those, but it's not a priority. So you offer them as either schools or universities as a nice to have. It's an elective, or you say, you know what, you need to complete 3 credits before you graduate. You need to complete 3 credits or 10 credits, whatever it is. It's usually a small amount of a course on interpersonal skill. We want them to take 1 semester of interpersonal skills, and we think that is enough. Or we say, you know what, even in the best institutions in the UAE, and not to say anybody specific, but even in the best institutions in the UAE, for example, the only requirement before students graduate for experiential learning, so getting an experience and an internship, is usually required one internship, 1 experience in 4 years. And then what do we tell students? No, it's okay, just focus on your studies. If your students at your institution only required 1 internship, or if you are a parent of a student, or if you are a student or graduate yourself and you're graduating with 1 internship in 4 years, you are already behind, period. Your students are not competitive, your graduates are not competitive in the world of work, and you as a student already 10 steps backwards from majority of not the majority, but from the top graduates out there. That's the reality. So the issue here is not that it's not offered and students are not exposed to it. The issue is not it's not prioritized and it's not required. And if you take away anything from this, is I would ask you, how can you make sure that some of these experiences, some of these topics that we're talking about and the human skills are required, not once in 4 years, but from the minute they join the university to the minute they graduate, every semester, there has to be something along those skills. Anyway, I'll pause here. Ivan, anything you want to add here before I get to comments?
No, but before we move on into these human skills, and I see a lot of good comments in Zoom, in the Zoom chat, and it's regarding about the use of artificial intelligence. Yes, artificial intelligence help us as a predictive tool of what could be the preferences of people, and can help us also to tailor make the curricula, the interests. But let's don't forget that before we get into the artificial intelligence, there is a way to generate the interest of the students to explore by himself the areas. So to have like a type of curricula where they need to explore their personal values, they need to explore the options of what they like, how do they take decisions, and explore career path by themselves, because then you are narrowing down, instead of going into the usual academical way of going too much in depth, you go into broadening their horizons in terms of exploring. Instead of telling them, this is what you need to go through, it is about generating enough growth mindset, enough curiosity for people, as helping them develop the right questions so that they can find by themselves and explore all of this wealth of information that there is in the internet, right? And that could be something that will help them in their future. Now, talking about human skills, and it's still quite related to the impact of automation and artificial intelligence in our lives. So we all know that there are things that humans are doing today that will be replaced by technology, right? Anything that can be automated should be automated, so that we have the time to develop ourselves in something that machines cannot copy. Today we have a set of different skills that are considered humans, and they are considered a priority for different organizations, and they are around the areas of how we manage ourselves, how we think, how we interact, and how we lead. Regardless of your level, it is about developing a series of skills that are going to help you thrive at work and differentiate yourself versus something that cannot be replaced by the machine. Basically, this tool of organizing these skills that are quite useful in order to thrive at work are divided into the areas of thinking, managing ourselves, which is the area of self-management. And then there is the interactions and leading, which is more about managing interactions or with external people, with managing interactions with others. All of these skills, in fact, have been developed have been assessed, researched by the MIT in order to say, how can we ensure that in the future of work, people can sustain their development, can practice, and can, in fact, not be redundant because of the use of technology at work. So having these 4 areas is what makes people, in fact, not replaceable. Of course, there will always be certain technical skills, and Elena, you mentioned financial literacy, digital literacy, and there is others that will help people. But today, in order to be successful at work, 95% of the job of success will not be measured in terms of the knowledge that you have acquired in terms of the literacy, but more in terms of the development that you have done with your human skills that will help you out to try to have not only an ability, but also the psychological capacity. So the willingness, if you want, to practice it. And it is a lot of these skills are related to meta skills. So in fact, are not stuff that you just learn in as a curricula. It's some stuff that you need to practice. And we will talk a little bit more about it before we move on versus, so how do we get ready?
And you know what, as you're speaking, you know what comes to mind as well is why we're talking about this for the youth, right? Is because what we've noticed in our work with Western, when we're working with corporations and we're working with mid-level to senior level professionals, and we realize that a lot of these skills are lacking, particularly in technical staff and employees that are kind of on that, you know, at that mid-level. And I always say this, most careers die at mid-level, because you can be really great finance person, IT, tech, whatever it is. You can be really good at those technical skills, but to get to that senior level, it's all these human skills, Yvonne, that you were talking about. And the trick with that is that technical skills, you can learn them. Yes, it's more about like learning a specific tool or a platform, etc. It takes just that practice. It's much easier than to learn interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills are our personality. It's how we behave. It's how we communicate. And that is so embedded in us from a young age that if we start to look at emotional intelligence later on in life, it becomes much harder because it questions so many things, and it's much harder to make a change later on. It's possible, and that's what the science tells us. It's possible, and there's methodology that, Yvonne, you're going to talk about. But at the end of the day, imagine what if we were taught these skills at a much earlier age? What if we're taught the importance of influencing other people, the importance of building your personal brand and reputation from a young age, the importance of building relationships in a genuine way, the importance of being a good listener and effective communicator from an early age? I don't know about you guys, but looking back at my early 20s, I said I was lacking that big time. And I felt like that was a big hurdle for me to get over later in life, and through really harsh wake-up calls. And I said, if I would have had these human skills earlier on, I'd be more creative, more curious. I'd know how to learn new things. I would be much more self-driven, right? But anyway, and I think that's the importance. And this is where we realize that best, like, we have to do something for the youth, because that's where it's at. Yes, we can do it for the corporates, to the employees, and that's great, and we're making an impact. But the reality is, if we really want to make an impact and really influence the change, it has to start at institutions and schools. So anyway, back to this. So if we are looking at creating this human skills excellence hub. So let's say you are an organization or an institution that is working with youth. Maybe you are a school. This is what we're going to talk about here. And this is really the main slide here. And this is pretty much the final slide. Is we're going to look at the what, why, who can help, and how that you can implement in your institutions. It is affordable. It's not going to cost a lot of money. You're not going to take a lot of budgets out of your thing. So it's really applicable. It's easy to implement. It's just putting the right team together, the right, couple of resources for you to make this happen. Or if you are a student or a graduate or just a young professional who is looking to implement some of these, you can actually do this in your own life, essentially. So you can implement. So this is for just about everybody in that category. Priya said, as a fresh graduate in a job, often they have lots of inhibitions. I don't know what does that mean?
So that they had a reframe a little bit, that they keep it for themselves, they don't dare to do something, which is true, but it has to do still with the fact that nobody has told them how to create mental processes in order to develop new skills, right? So we don't expect that inhibition, which is a natural thing that happens in the brain, because inhibition is a protection against fear, against danger, against big changes. So, but imagine that, and you said it, Elena, the way we learn human skills is very different than the way that we pass on knowledge, technical knowledge, to others. So if it is about mathematics, it's more about understanding certain principles and not extrapolating them around. Now, soft skills or the human skills need to have a certain difference in terms of how they develop. So the first thing is, well, you said it, generating the interest, because the interest is is almost the bait for people to do the change. It's like motivation. The second step will be around how do we help them to learn by practicing, but practicing not like, hey, about leadership, let's go and be a manager for one day. No, forget it. It's more about practicing the skills that are around leadership and telling them, hey, it is possible to practice a behavior in a repetitive manner until it becomes automatic in your mind. So people, and that's the belief for most of us, is that when we need to learn something like be a better communication, it's about just daring to speak in front of 100 or 200 people. But maybe it is not like that. It is more about an individualized approach where we understand, or we help people, the student develop a lot of self-awareness, so that he understands what is his challenge and he can practice in a recurrent, a frequent basis, a consistent basis, these skills with micro behaviors. So practicing or learning will be, these human skills is about going into action, helping people have actions, helping them to have enough spacing. So it cannot be taught like for 2-3 hours in a course. Spacing helps the brain generate insights, do the connections inside of the different areas of our brain in order to digest the information and decide what it is the importance individually for me. Being able to practice in a challenging way so that there is a micro challenge. So it's not boring like repetition, but it is more about giving them the challenge. If you succeed to do this, you will be able to do X, Y, Z. So giving them the possibility that is challenging enough. The other thing is that it needs to be in an environment of safety where you can speak up. Don't be afraid of failing, because life, and imagine if we teach our children, our youth, to don't be afraid of failing, how much innovation, how much they could do, how much this inhibition that was mentioned just before could be overcome. What if I didn't have the fear of speaking up to 300 people, 400 people, because I have been practicing how to dare during my life. So then it is a process. Learning this is a process that is relatable. There is iterations, because you have to practice a micro action, see if it worked or if it failed, and helping people to create this ongoing process of experimenting with actions, right? Instead of going and thinking, yes, you need to be a better communicator. Oh, as soon as this happens, the brain reacts with fear. And when there is fear, there is stress. And when there is a stress, there is no moving forward. Motivation goes down. So making a small micro behaviors, spacing the learning, being challenging, being in an environment of safety, giving the opportunity of people of discussing social interactions. We learn from each other. And this is what we have discovered as partners in our investment, is that we continuously feeding each other. So social interaction is something that helps people really learn these human skills. That's it for me.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So we've covered the what, essentially. You've covered quite a bit. So let's move to the why. So again, we have, I mean, I've pointed to it on the last slide a bit, but essentially one of the biggest things is just, how do you stay relevant? How do you stay competitive? And this is what we're kind of pushing on students and educators, is to say, don't worry about today. Don't worry about what is it today. How can you prepare for the future of work? What is your particular role and industry? No matter where you are, if you're a student or graduate or working professional, understanding how can you maintain your competitive edge? How can you diversify in a way that makes sense your skill set, maybe your work, maybe your business, whatever it may be, to stay relevant, because the world of work is changing like this. And if you're only focusing on what's going on today, and because whatever you're doing is working today, there's a high probability you're going to be left out in the future. So getting people to start thinking about, what does it take to maintain your competitive edge, to make sure you don't go out of business or lose your job, etc. Right? And as I mentioned earlier, there's a reason majority of jobs die at mid-level. They don't go beyond mid-level. right? And if you're happy at that stage, perfectly fine. It's, you know, we all set our own definitions of success. But if you're a person who's saying, no, I want to grow, I want to progress, I want to continue to evolve in my career, then you really need to start looking at those gaps and addressing them sooner than later. And as educators and leaders at organizations and institutions, it's our job to make sure we provide those resources and opportunities for students and making it a priority. We spend at institutions so much money, and I've worked at various organizations and institutions in different parts of the world, and I can tell you the amount of money we're spending on things that are just not as essential. Yet we neglect completely the impact that student affairs has, that career services has. Like at the end of the day, that is what's going to differentiate your institution is, are you actually creating opportunities for students to get that experience? Or are you saying that's not what higher education is for? Right. And that's why, and maybe that's fair. And maybe if you're a large research institution, maybe that's not your priority to prepare students for the workforce, because if we look at definition of higher education institutions, they're academia. It's about academia. It's about sharing that knowledge. It's not necessarily about applying that knowledge. So you can argue that point, but then what's going to happen is you need to realize that if you're not implementing it, there are going to be alternative providers that are going to implement it. And in a world where students are now questioning, do I really need a 4-year degree? Do I really need to do this kind of education? Or can I go to this alternative option of a technical school or a trade school where I can actually get the skills that I need to do the job that I need to do, to get paid high, to get a high paycheck and have a purpose and enjoy what I do. And hey, even if I don't like it, at least I didn't spend 4 years at a university studying something that, you know, didn't bring me any value. So again, I'm a huge fan of higher education. I've spent majority of my career in that, and I love institutions, and I'm all about continuing one's education. But you have to understand that the world is changing and the generations are changing, and what young people are requiring today of their future education jobs is very different than what was when we first established universities and higher education places. Yet we're still operating at a level like we're in 1900s. That's the reality. Majority of higher education institutions operating as if we're still back in 1900s or even 2000s. You don't have to go far. So anyway, so the idea is here really for you to grow, for you to really understand your purpose. You have to start doing these human skills, because as Ivan mentioned, the human skills, it's not just about communication. It's also discovering, what do I want? What is my purpose? Like, what, as fluffy as this may sound to some of you, but realistically, what makes me happy to wake up in the morning and go do something I enjoy, right? So discovering that purpose requires having those human skills and having these conversations at a much earlier age. Anyway, move on, because I realized I can spend hours on this.
Elena, just a very short comment, because when you were talking, I was thinking about one of the latest interviews that we had with university students and where we asked about their career department. And it looks like they perceive it more like an empathy department. So people who are there just to listen, but who are not enough aware about the options to help them discover for the students the purpose, as you mentioned, or to have a discussion where they generate this level of interest or practice to look for the right answers. So right now, it's almost like career department is equal to have a life coach or just to have a chit chat with someone who will direct you to websites, instead of being capable of rebranding the department from career department to human development. So the same thing that we are talking about is human skills excellence that will help people learn how to fish instead of giving them the fish already prepared, right? And this is something that is quite necessary today. Let's move on.
So, and Priya has mentioned a few great comments. Yes, maintaining competitive edge is all about keeping innovative mindset, investment in that lifelong learning. And you're right, professional certifications are gaining momentum because they're industry specific. So that's very spot on. So right now we talked about, in case you have to sell this idea to your institutions or your management, or maybe you are the management and you are saying, I'm not really convinced about why we should do this. We talked about the what, we talked about the importance of it. And then let's talk about who can help. Right. So we're not talking about going and restructuring your whole organization or institution. It's just work with what you have. It's just prioritize it. That's it. That's all we're asking you to do. Just prioritize it, right? For the future generations, for the younger me that was in university and didn't have the support, please prioritize us. Prioritize individuals like that who are just needing our help, right? And resources. So, and who can help? So professional associations. So if you are an institution or even an organization, there's a lot of ways you can work more proactively. Again, even if you're doing this, the thing is, the majority of the time, we're doing these engagements once a year. We're not, or like once or twice a year with different entities. We're not utilizing our networks as institutions and organizations, and maybe even graduates and parents. We're not utilizing what's at our disposal to really create opportunities for students to thrive, for employees to thrive. What I mean by that is that let's just look at, even if you're doing some of this already, what can you do better? How can you utilize it in a more effective way? So professional associations, for example, in the world of project management, you have the Project Management Institute. They do different sessions on, a life in the world of a project manager, right? How can your institution work with institutions like this, or with accounting accrediting body, or with marketing accrediting bodies, or with artificial intelligence institutions? Like in the UAE, we have the whole Ministry of Artificial Intelligence, right? Recently, something like that. So how can you engage with these that are already there, and they're doing these things for free it's their benefit. You don't have to pay them anything. It's a mutually beneficial. They get members. You get a resource from them to deliver topics, to get exposure to your students, etc. Others, education institutions and learning platforms. I'm not even going to go into the world of EdTech. There's so much resource and so much access to information and knowledge, and institutions and companies like ourselves who would be more than happy to say, listen, how can we work together? How can we help your students? How can we help you implement this, right? In a way that makes sense, in a way that is mutually beneficial, right? The idea is impact. That's what we're here after. Alumni networks, volunteer groups. How can you utilize your alumni, not to necessarily do fundraising from them, but how can you get them to, maybe you get them on job shadowing, like get one of your alumni who is going to give opportunities to your students to job shadow different departments in their organizations, who's going to give them opportunity for apprenticeships. Whatever happened to apprenticeship? Can we just talk about that for just a minute? What happened to apprenticeships? Do you know that in 1960s, I think it was like the normal thing, at least in the US and other countries. It was a normal thing that you study a little bit at a university, 2, 3, 4 hours, you have your class. And then after that, what do? You go work in that particular industry. What happened to that? Now we're at a point where a student goes to class twice a day. They have an hour and a half, maybe a 2-hour lecture. And then it's too much to ask them to go to work. It's too much because they have to study. It's too much. And Charlie said apprenticeships don't exist anymore. And Untitled, what it is. Yeah. So it's just exposure to the world of work. It's an internship, but all the time. You're just always working. You're always getting exposure. It is mind-blowing to me that we are expecting that students, all you need to do today is just study because it's too much for you. And then we want them to graduate from university. We drop them into the world of work where it's politics, games, competition, all of those things. And then we expect them to be resilient, and we expect them to shift their mindset from being a student to overnight. They need to have a mindset of an employee, which is a very different mindset. A student mindset is consumption. You're consuming, you're taking on knowledge. An employee mindset is a producer mindset. You need to produce, you need to create, you need to innovate, you need to speak up. But we're not teaching that here. So anyway, I know I'm going down the rabbit hole here, but yeah. So Oliver, Charlie, very good point. Charlie, yes, to answer your question, yes, we will be. It is being recorded, and we'll share the slides accordingly. Thank you. So anyway, the point is that there is there are people that can help. That's what I'm trying to get at, that you don't need to create these departments and throw a ton of money into things. There are existing resources within your reach that can actually help. And then we can move on to the how. And Charlie, I'll get back to your point in a minute. Just want to finish up on this. So in terms of the how, So again, I've mentioned earlier, job shadowing, apprenticeships, right? Company CSR. So what do I mean by that is if you are an institution and you are trying to, if you're an institution, you're trying to work with corporates a little bit more. Most companies have, of course, corporate social responsibility or social responsibility kind of engagement, outreach, community efforts. A lot of those efforts are around helping young people with experience, industry experience, etc. There's already a lot of things happening on the corporate side that institutions can benefit from, but the thing is, we're not talking to each other. That's the problem. We talk to each other again once a year when it's time for a career fair. We're asking for, I don't know, a few $100s of the company to come display their table and expect them to talk to hundreds of students in one go and expect students to get jobs out of that. Once a year, it's not enough. It needs to be continuous. It needs to be ongoing. It needs to be initiatives that are, again, similar like apprenticeships. So if you don't have an apprenticeship program, why don't you create one? Instead of requiring 3 credits to take of, I don't know, an elective that they will never use, create a mandatory course. And I know it sounds like some people are like, oh my God, I have to change the curriculum. But realistically, what choice do you have? Like, what's the purpose of an institution if it's not preparing youth for the future? So if you're worried about the work that's going to go into changing a curriculum, I don't know why we're not doing this already. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that road. But the point is that creating a requirement where every semester student has to have X number of hours where they're actually doing apprenticeship, exposure, job shadows, visits to companies. I bet you there's a lot of companies that'll be on board on this. They're already doing it in many cases. There are job shadow platforms that do it. It's just about you connecting with them and talking to each other. Anyway, moving on, coaching and mentoring is the final point here. So how can you create opportunities for students to get coached and mentored? Again, who can help? Look at number 3. Who from your alumni can do some coaching or mentoring for these students, right, on more regular basis? Who can help within your organization? Do you have an experienced career coach? Can you bring on a career coach that comes on campus, I don't know, a couple of times per semester and does some coaching with students, right? Because right now, career services professionals at universities cater to hundreds of students at one time. So of course, they cannot possibly coach everybody. They cannot possibly advise everybody individual and customize and tailor to them. It's not possible. They're too spread thin. So again, looking at prioritizing it, where can you allocate resources towards career development of students, towards connecting them with corporations and creating these apprenticeship opportunities versus other things that your institution might be doing among marketing or whatever it is? Because I guarantee you, if you have great apprenticeship programs, and because they're so non-existent these days, somehow we lost this, and that's a trend we need to bring back. Because they're so non-existent, if your institution implements it and your graduates are getting jobs, they're top of their class, top of the market, top talent in the world of work, I promise you that is better marketing than anything you can spend on advertisements or anything else. That is your marketing. You are creating ambassadors that are going to go onto the world of work, and then they're going to be the one coming back to then give those opportunities to your students. So if you're going to invest money somewhere, and universities spend millions on marketing, millions of dollars on marketing every year. So do not tell me you don't have the funds. I know how much money is spent on marketing and institutions. Do not tell me you don't have a small portion you can allocate to creating some of these apprenticeship or hiring somebody who leads just on these apprenticeship programs. Anyway, I am done with that.
I love the blunt message, Elena. It is simply developing human skills. It is about positioning the value that you can create for our youth so that they are successful in the future. So, and you said it quite right. It's about having a methodology to help them learn how to learn, basically, and having the means, this network or these areas where you have coaching opportunities to practice all together in order to develop this human skill. It goes beyond just finding a job. It goes about helping people, having the mental process to choose right, to know better what they want in life. Imagine if we have a new generation of people that does that. We are in a better society already, right?
Absolutely. And I love Charlie's comment. And that is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Charlie said, in all fairness, young people started demanding full payment for internships, which priced them out of the job market before they even had a chance to get in. Because companies figure, if I have to pay, I'll hire someone with experience. Thank you for that. Agreed. I completely agree. You don't know how much when we talk to young people, we say experience is experience. But you know what happens? We are bombarding them that, if they're going to graduate from our institution, you're going to get a high paying job, because that's how you do marketing at institutions. When you go to career fairs, what is the one thing, although higher education institutions are not necessarily there to get students jobs, as I've mentioned earlier, so we can argue that point. But how do we sell an education is when we go to talk to students, whether it's undergraduate, master's, MBA, we say, you get this degree, it's going to get you an access to a job market. And we start putting in their minds of why they should join our institution. So we hook them with, it's going to get us a job. So their expectation is, I'm going to graduate from here, I'm going to get a high paying job. And you know what? I'm going to get a paid internship because Abdullah or Sarah or John across the street got a paid one. So automatically we're looking at what other people are doing. Goes back to interpersonal skills. Have we taken time to explore, not worrying about what everybody else is doing around us, but explore the reality of where we are as young people, as professionals? So same things, by the way, for career change seekers. So we need to, this is again why we're talking about these human skills and these earlier interactions, earlier apprenticeships, earlier internships from the moment they join a university, volunteering, job shadowing, because you don't get paid for volunteer, you don't necessarily get paid for internships, and especially, and you don't expect at the freshman level to get paid for an internship, usually, right? Usually these internships are towards their graduating. So when they're fourth year, their expectation is already set in their mind. But what if we start requiring it from an early age to say, you need to volunteer, et cetera, et cetera? What that does is to, first of all, it gives them a reality check that, hey, it's not always going to be paid, and you need to earn that privilege. And B, they see the impact that these volunteer opportunities give them. They see the benefit of it without even a paycheck. That's what we're telling them. We are giving them an exposure to say, oh, you know what, that was a really cool opportunity. And no, I didn't get paid, but I learned X, Y, and Z, or I met this person and then that person got me an internship and then that person got me a job that actually pays me really well. Or, you know what, I did this internship or apprenticeship or volunteer, and you know what, I realized that I don't want to do this degree anymore. That's what I'm trying to get at. But we are massaging them to say, yes, graduate, you're going to get this degree, and you should be, you need to go out into the world and get this job. It's not realistic. What world do we live in where students are graduating? And there was another statistic, students are graduating, their expectation for a starting salary is astronomical.
Exactly.
But who is embedding these thoughts in their minds? Us, educators, parents, corporate. Like, do you get what I'm saying? So like, we are the problem and the solution. And then they don't know what they don't know. We don't know what we don't know as humans. Our job as educators is to give them a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a struggle from early age. That is the best thing we can do for young people, is to put them through a little bit of struggle that is good for them, working a little bit for free, doing different things, trying different things. And that's how you build those skills that then you can take forward. So anyway, I know we are on the dot. It is time for, yes, Charlie, you mentioned the media, every headline in tech is about how much money young people are making now. Absolutely. But again, critical thinking, critical thinking, interpersonal skills. If we're able to teach students that, hey, listen, what you see on social media, what you see on the news, question it. Is it a fact? Is it a fact that this is the reality? Do you know somebody who's making this much money? Wonderful. They do. What did they do to get there? Right. I have younger sisters, and one of them is 18, and she was telling me that she used to become a YouTube star because that's how much money they're making. I said, do you know that they're all in debt and they're not actually making any money? It's all for show. You don't know that for a fact. And so this is the reality, but this is why it's becoming even more important to require these things from an earlier age, 15, 16, 17 onwards, every single year, every single semester, requiring them to have this. Because realistically, we don't. There's not facts. They are living in a bubbled world that we have created, and So that's all I got here. But Ivan, I know we're over time now. Thank you.
Yes. So this is time to just to wrap up and tell you that, well, maybe we can continue the communication, we can continue the discussion. So you have the possibility to have a chat with us about how do we implement the Human Skills Hub. You can send an email, elena@bestern.co, just to book 20 minutes with Elena and yourself, just to have a discussion about how can we change the way people learns and thrives and get prepared for the future of work, right? How can you use it as a way of differentiating your organization versus the rest? We have 150 universities in the UAE. We have approximately 500 high school, and the differentiation is very, very little.
Thank you guys for being here. And Charlie, to answer your questions, yes, we're absolutely open to speaking at other events. Please feel free to reach out to us, have a chat. We'll be more than happy to contribute and share this knowledge. Again, for us, it's about making an impact. And there's a personal, if you haven't felt it through this webinar, there is a personal thing here where it's just it's a challenge we want to solve, and it's and there's a lot of simple solutions. We just need to all come together, and we're all going to be better off for it. So thank you all for being here. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We look forward to continuing the conversation. And Ivan, thank you for being an amazing co-host.
Thank you, Elena. It was awesome to have your passion on education live. It is amazing. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you all.